world's greatest radio.
We give you a reason to stay.
Radio, the way it should be heard.
You got the power.
The views and opinions expressed are those of the host and guest and not necessarily those of TalkTainmentRadio.com, the management, the staff, or K&E World Network, LLC.
This is All in Our Family. I'm Yolanda Robinson. We are all family. All in Our Family, heard exclusively on TalkTainmentRadio.com. Radio, the way it should be heard. This is All in Our Family, and you're listening to All in Our Family, and I'm Yolanda Robinson, and this is radio, the way it should be heard. Listening audience, you know what? I got a call, and my book is just going everywhere. I am surprised. I am actually surprised. First, I got a call, and it's at the State House. There's magic in the blackberry patch. You can get it at the gift shop at the State House. And now it's in the exhibit at Poindexter Village at the Ohio Historical Connection. So if you're in Columbus or if you live here, you got to see it and say hi to my book when you see it in the exhibit. But there's magic in the blackberry patch. And then someone just called me and I said, oh my gosh, they said you got a good review in Echoes of Ohio that's done by the Ohio Historic Connection, and it's in the July and August edition of Echoes, which is the news magazine for the Ohio Historic Connection. And I like to thank Marlene Barman for doing that review. You don't know how surprised I was, but thank you so much. But today we're going to talk about gardening. And I have the expert in the house, Julia Lynn Walker, who is the manager of the Bronzeville's Growers Market. Julia Lynn, how are you today?
I'm well, Yolanda, and thank you so much for inviting me and representing the Bronzeville Growers Market.
Oh, my gosh. You know what? I saw that, and I said, look at this. And it's in the neighborhood where I grew up at. I couldn't believe. I said, "Oh, they got a growers market right over there." Now, what made you want to do this, Julia Lynn?
Well, gardening has always been in my family. I grew up. Both my maternal and paternal grandparents had gardens. My parents had a garden in our yard. At the end of the summer, about this time, we would begin to can excess produce, and even if we didn't grow something, we'd go down to Central Market and buy produce and bring it back and can it or put it up for the winter, as we like to say. Yeah. And so even as I grew older and traveled various places, I always had a garden, no matter how large or how small. Even in a small container, I always grew something, no matter where I was.
You know what? I can remember that too at our house. I think that was kind of common. We used to can and have a lot of things in the basement. You know, the peaches, the plums, the applesauce, and
always tomatoes. We always had tomato sauce.
Oh yes, and some cha-cha.
That's right.
We make some cha-cha to put over your beans, and then have that for the entire summer. And that would be an activity that the entire family got involved in.
So the question came up: why have we, as African Americans, moved away from gardening? Why is it that we find it difficult to continue to grow and be sustainable in terms of our food consumption, and also just have better food? Because what we grow ourselves is generally organic, whether or not we follow all the legal process for it. But when we grow our own and we really develop our own compost, it really is better than anything that we can buy that's already canned or produced commercially.
Oh yes, and it tastes so good. Yummy. I could think about one of my friends. She has a garden, and I just love to go get some of her onions and put it in my salad, and it doesn't even taste like a salad you get at the store.
You're right.
It's so good.
And so many people have come. Now we're at 17th and Mount Vernon, 925 Mount Vernon. You'll see where the shipping containers are. So many people have come up, purchased, and then come back the next day or called and texted me and talked about how good it is.
Oh, wow.
One fellow in particular, he called, he said, oh, those beets were just wonderful. And I said, okay, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, being very. And then 2 days later, he popped up and he brought me a small dish. He said, no, you just have to taste the way I prepared them. And he actually prepared the beets and brought them to me to share the enjoyment that he had with these beets.
It's nothing like it. I mean, you know, I've always had kind of like memories of maybe just going back in the backyard, and I don't even have that in my home, and I want to get it. But you know, we had the pear trees, we had the apple trees, and the plum trees, and you know, the whole neighborhood would share.
Exactly,
because what you didn't have, the other person would have, and we would all can.
You see, and so we've missed that sense of communal living, of sharing, and we shared not only our produce but our expertise in developing the produce. And sometimes you remember your mother would send you out for something, and you would end up eating it and wouldn't even bring it back in. And she said, well, what happened to it? Well, you know, I ate it before I got in the house. So you go back for some more. But we've lost that connection to the land. And very often sometimes, I should say now that the Bronzeville Growers Market is sponsored by Bethany Presbyterian Church. And
that's awesome.
You know, and other churches and schools, you know, are doing a similar thing. But out of that process, because we had excess produce, then I began to look at what I'm calling an urban farm stand experience. Because, you know, in the United States, this question of a farmer's market is pretty defined. So we say it's an urban farm stand experience. But when I was gardening, and still am, you know, when I'm gardening in the community garden behind Bethany Presbyterian Church, sometimes people would come by, young people in their teens, in their 20s, sometimes their 30s, and they would say to me, why are you working so hard? I pass by here every day, and that looks like slavery times. I can't be doing nothing like that. And I really have to take time and talk with them to get them to understand why it's important to put in that kind of labor to produce for yourself.
Now, you know, when you do a garden, I mean, and you have a family that's doing it, and the children are involved, what will they gain besides some good food? What kinds of things? I know that you can learn some excellent skills from doing it.
Well, first of all, it's good for your health. So being out for at least an hour a day, you know, weeding, planting, trimming, creating structures that are necessary for the garden, all of that is excellent exercise. And so it's really good for us to be out and have that kind of physical labor because it keeps our body functioning. And it's also good then in terms of, you know, in terms of developing the actual produce, as you said, that's good for our bodies. But it's also good in terms of, it's interesting, there are academic skills that can be developed by gardening. There's math involved. I actually taught a course in urban farming under the Farm Services Agency recently. And in several of the classes, I would say, all right, now we have X number of seeds, your land is so big, how do you know how much to plant? And there are very specific instructions for how far apart the seed should be, or how far apart you plant your seedlings. And so there is math involved.
So they're learning measurements.
Absolutely. And a couple of some of the adults were actually stumped on it. I was like, no, count your seeds, and now look at the land, and then, you know, how do you figure out how many seeds per square foot or however or linear foot that you're doing. And so, you know, so we have math. We also talk about history in terms of development of different communities, and even the history of a particular parcel of land and the community itself. So there are a number of what are regarded as academic disciplines that can be attached to gardening.
Yes, because you can go across disciplines, and you know, you wouldn't even know that you're learning.
Absolutely. You just have the discussion.
It's a lot different than sitting in a classroom and having a lecture, because you got the hands-on, you know, and you're actually doing it, and you can see the science that's involved in doing the garden.
And particularly for organic gardeners, for instance, when we really discourage people from going to the store and buying something that kills the weeds, for instance. And so you can kill weeds with a vinegar solution. There are other solutions that can be made from common household products, but you have to know the correct balance, the correct ratio, in terms of the composition of those ingredients.
So you're learning some chemistry too.
Absolutely.
Yes, don't even know it.
You see? And so that does help to develop some interest in these areas and that you would take outside. A recent discussion that I've also been trying to have is that there's law attached to gardening.
Law?
Absolutely.
I never even thought about that.
I'm telling you.
Tell me about it.
For instance, well, first of all the municipal gardens are controlled by municipal regulations under the City of Columbus. And so it may come under the Department of Health, or it may become under the Department of Agriculture or another area, but there are 3 or 4 sets of regulations that determine where gardens can be and what can be grown or contained in the gardens, because some people want to keep animals. So animals are regulated by the Department of Health. There's also the Ohio Department of Agriculture that determines what produce can be grown and where. Now, you also have to look at the buildings, the infrastructure, and the City of Columbus regulates how close, for instance, if you have a greenhouse on a property, where the greenhouse can be located, or even how close the fence can be, to the sidewalk. And so you really have to know the regulations to be able to ensure that your garden is in the right place. Then the way it grows is controlled by the city. And recently a neighbor contacted the city to say that our garden was growing noxious weeds that were attracting mice and other rodents that therefore were coming onto his land. Well, our garden is very isolated, but we were to identify the ordinance, and we were able to then find out exactly how high we were allowed to grow the grass, and then we cut it accordingly. So you do have to know about the law, and you have to know about the legal regulations attached that come to you through the city, through the county, and through the state.
You know what, Julie Lynn? I never even thought about that. When we used to just plant and never even think about keep moving. Never even think about looking at the codes and the legal what's legally involved.
And if you want to use the term organic, you have to be very careful, and you have to be extremely clear on the regulations, because even the compost, for instance, which is normally a layer of different kinds of material that decompose and then create an element that you can use to cover your seeds or your plants, and then that helps to keep down the weeds. It also nourishes the soil. But if you're growing organically, there are actually regulations as to what can go into the compost pile. So you can't just go around and pick up some stuff and bring it back and put it in the pile like some folks do. You really are only allowed to put certain things in, and then that leads to the growth of the other materials or the plants as well. So it's all highly regulated, and you really have to know exactly what you're doing.
I didn't know that. You know what? I am so glad I talked to you. I have had dreams about maybe having a greenhouse. I thought that would be so wonderful to just be able to go back in your own home and pick out some nice green beans.
And you should. I encourage everybody.
But do you have to have a greenhouse to do it? Can you do it?
Absolutely not. In fact, no. And one of the things that you can actually do is there are different structures you can use. If you have some old windows sitting around your property, you can actually place them so that they form a kind of greenhouse. All right, so you would just nail them together or create a hinge on them, and so that would become your greenhouse without a more formal situation. They're also what they call the cloches. You can cut off those gallon bottles take off the bottom, and you can use the bottle, and put it over your seedlings or your plants, and that becomes like a small greenhouse. So there are all kinds of ways you can protect your plants.
So you're actually doing the neighborhood and the planet a favor, because you're doing some recycling too.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness!
So
awesome.
our theory is we say rethink, reduce, reuse, recycle.
Oh my gosh,
And
that's awesome. So about how many people over there in the Bronzeville area are involved with the Bronzeville Growers Market?
All right, the Growers Market itself really consists of the Bethany Bronzeville Community Garden and the Linden Association Garden, and then we have other people who come in on a different basis, on a irregular basis. And so we've had the Columbus Public Library there. We've had two good treats, which is actually these fruit and vegetable flavored popsicles, which are wonderful. We're expecting someone from the Southfield area tomorrow, which will be a new market, a new garden. And then we will be looking at having others later. In fact, on August 30th, we anticipate having a harvest festival with a number of different community gardens participating. And so it varies from week to week. This week we've got some incredibly fresh radishes. We have some Swiss chard, and we've got something that everybody's been fighting over, and I can't get enough of, and that's okra. I've just been shocked at how many people want okra and want it fresh, and how much they want. But we will have a fresh batch of okra tomorrow.
So you can go over there and purchase some real organic.
Absolutely.
you know it's absolutely organic because they're growing it right outside.
Yes. We also get produce from the Yellowbird Food Shed, which is a consortium that collects food from 150 miles around Columbus, and all of it is from organic farmers. And so we've got, last week we had peaches, we had green beans, we have cabbages, and so you really can take care of yourself for a whole week until you come back the next week.
But summer's almost gone, and we're going to be. Are you going to go throughout the year, or
not until throughout the year? We'll go through the end of September, because this is actually a good harvest period, and a number of people have already recently planted for the fall. So people think that there's one time to plant. In Columbus, you can actually put in 3 plantings. You can start in March or April, particularly if you have a greenhouse, and then certainly May, July, and then July, August. You can do, and what you're planting now are a number of the greens, the collards, mustard, kale, and some of those will last through November, depending on our weather. And you may remember your parents or grandparents saying the greens were often sweeter after they had the first frost. And so, don't worry about them. They'll look a little funny, but they'll be wonderful to eat.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh, so you're going to be going and you're going to be planning, and then in September and October
we will have the market until September 27th, and on that day the OSU Medical Center's food demonstration kitchen will be available, and they're going to be cooking some of the vegetables and showing different ways that you can utilize the produce. Because where the market is situated, Mount Vernon 17th, is in the 43203 zip code, which is a food desert, meaning there is no local supermarket that is close, accessible, and provides healthy food.
Now, how is that? I mean, can people use their stamps to get some of the food?
Okay, this year they can, but we will apply next year so that people can use WIC or Produce Perks, or any of the others, yes. But this year, unfortunately, it's cash only.
Oh, okay.
But let me speak to that, because some people said, that's going to be difficult, because if you don't accept stamps, people aren't going to buy. But actually, we have found that people do understand the value of good produce, and they have used cash to buy small amounts, but they've used cash to buy. So I think it's about educating people, so they say, okay, I'll use my stamps for something else on another time, but I'll pay you in cash. And as I said, this is a pilot. We want to see how it works. We'll have a different structure next year, and certainly we will be able to register for the stamps.
Oh, that will be so awesome! I can can see, putting some money aside for the vegetables and fruit because they taste so much better.
They really do.
Goodness. You can't. It's. I can't even explain it, but it's so good. Yeah. I could just sit there and say, I'm not going to eat like this. When you get one of those meals and your body says, thank you very much.
Exactly. And that's why people are coming back and they'll say, well, you have those same green beans? I'll say, well, no, this week we have, no. I want those green beans because those were really good.
Yes.
But let me say also that we have support from the Nation of Islam, and we've got bean pies.
You have bean pies?
Absolutely.
Oh, my gosh. I got to get over there.
We've got the full bean pie for $10, and then we've got the small one for $2.
Wow.
So if you haven't had a bean pie for a while, come get some fresh produce, and then for dessert, a bean pie.
Wow, yeah. So I remember those bean pies, and they are so delicious. Oh, my goodness. I got to get over there. And you got to get over there, too.
Right.
Now, what is the ages? We talked about the individuals that are with the Bronzeville Growers Market, but what are the ages of the individuals? Are they all our age, or are they different ages?
The market managers, I'm the market manager, but the garden managers who bring the tables and set up are basically our age. But I've been very fortunate to have a relationship with the Columbus Urban League this year. And I was fortunate in being able to have 2 interns who are high school students. And they have been with us for 10 weeks, and they've participated both in the market as well the garden, and they've helped to publicize. So we've been leafleting and going to different places and talking to people, and then we were able to visit different gardens so that they get a perspective and be able to see how the Bronzeville Community Garden differs from some of the other gardens. And then we were able to visit 2 markets so they could also see how the Bronzeville Growers Market differs from the other markets, because this is a whole movement actually within Columbus, Ohio, and the United States.
So it's and the movement's growing. More
Absolutely.
And what are the benefits from the neighborhood? I mean, as far as the neighborhood.
Well, we find that the people come together around food. As I mentioned before, when I'm very often when I'm walking in the garden, working in the garden, people come by and they will comment and they will relate to an experience that they've had. Number one, some of them want to actually work in the garden, and I've had a few healthcare workers who are coming as employees to work in some of the homes around the garden, and I've given them a piece of land and they've developed something. And it's very interesting to see them working and growing what they want. And then we have people who volunteered to work in the garden simply from passing by and seeing it, and that's been good. But we've also developed stronger relationships with other community institutions, both other churches. I mentioned the Urban League. We've done a number of classes with the King Arts Complex with their summer youth program. So bringing the youth to the garden has just been fantastic.
So it's a wonderful collaboration.
Yeah.
You got it going on over there.
You show them different food, and then one time a rabbit ran out, and the kids looked up at it, and it was like television. They said, "Make it do it again." And I'm like, "No, this is nature. In nature, you can't rewind."
Oh my goodness, that's a lot of good things that garden is creating since you did the garden. Now, you said you went to other neighborhoods and looked at, how does the Bronzeville's Growers Market compare to the ones in the other neighborhoods?
All right, the Bronzeville Community Garden was actually started to supplement the community lunch program that Bethany Presbyterian Church has sponsored for 14 years now. It's every Saturday from 11:30 to 1, and it's open to anyone who's hungry. There are no questions asked, there's no proselytizing, you have to listen to a service, you don't have to sign anything, you just have to come in, eat, and clean up after yourself. Well, we were working very closely with the Mid-Ohio Food Bank, but we found that with an expansion of food pantries, then there was actually a reduction in produce that was available for some of their more established institutions. And so it was just a question of the need being met in different ways. And so then we started to look more formally at the garden as a way to provide produce, and then we would know what we have when and be able to rely upon it, because more and more there just wasn't the amount of produce which was available at Mid-Ohio. But that was just, because of the increase in pantries. And so a number of us in the community garden movement are actually saying that our business is to put the food pantries out of business. Because we don't want people being dependent and going in. And in fact, we had one day, people said, Thursday's a bad day to have the market because they're giving away free food down the street at so-and-so church. I said, I'm no competition in the end. This is better. And when people understand that and they start growing their own, when we develop that kind of self-sufficiency, it then leads to empowerment and growth in other areas of our lives. And that's what we're looking at. So the market is an extension of the garden. The garden was an extension of the community lunch program. And we just see it continuing to grow in other areas.
Well, how can you become a member? Do you have to live out there to be a member?
No.
Or what do you do to be a member?
No, in fact, one of my best helpers lives way out on Gender Road someplace. But no, anyone can provide assistance at any time. You can contact me. We have a Facebook page. You can send me a message through the Bronzeville Growers Market Facebook page. And then I will certainly get back to you and respond accordingly. The market is available every Thursday from tomorrow until September 27th, 3 to 6 p.m. at 925 Mount Vernon Avenue, which is the corner of Mount Vernon and 17th. You'll see that's where the shipping containers are. And it's the Maroon Arts Group, and they are one of our partners. So the Maroon Arts Group, the Yellowbird Food Shed, the OSU CarePoint East, and I'm missing one other, but they're our partners for now. The Linden Garden Association. How can I forget Linden? Yes, the Linden Garden Association.
That's awesome.
So they're our partners for now.
Oh my goodness! And when we go over there, what can we get when we go over there? Like if I go over there tomorrow.
Tomorrow I can tell you for sure you will have fresh chard, radishes, fresh beets, and okra. Peppers, 3 or 4 different types of peppers, and tomatoes. I can tell you that for sure. And then there will be other zucchini. We have some decorative gourds. The people, I've been telling people you can buy them now and save them for Kwanzaa. Dry them off. We may have some herbs. And so I'll see but we have to, I go out in the morning tomorrow and just see what's fresh and what looks best and what we have enough of to cut, because we don't want to cut too much and then the plant dies. Just enough to share and have the plant continue to grow.
Fresh organic food, the real tasty stuff, y'all.
That's
good.
Right. The real tasty stuff.
This is real good, delicious food.
That's correct.
This isn't since you're not going to be open during the winter, but what can we grow in our house in the winter if we want to maybe have something that's fresh?
In the home in the winter, you pretty much have to use grow lights, and so you have to set up a system that uses artificial lighting to get the plants growing. Unless you have a south-facing window that receives very strong light, it's difficult. So what I encourage people to do is use really the December, January, February is kind of planning months, getting your stuff in order, and then by March you can start doing certain seeds and move on. Now,
when you say getting your stuff in order, what are you actually doing?
It's a great time to get the seed catalogs and read up on them and see what you can order. But let me say first, you ought to look at your land and determine what kind of exposure does it get. Is it south-facing, north-facing, east or west, and when does it get that kind of sun? How large is it? And then what is the condition of the soil? And you can have your soil tested so that if it needs to be amended and the pH changed, then you can do that, and then it will be ready. And that will sit over the winter, and then it will be ready. The other thing that you could do now are that there are some perennial herbs, for instance, parsley, and you can begin to plant parsley now and put it even in containers, and then grow it over the winter, and then in the spring you can transplant it into the garden proper. So there are a number of perennial herbs or plants. And I also encourage perennial flowers because flowers help to attract the pollinators, the bees and the butterflies. And you can start the pollinators now, you can start some of the herbs now, and then transplant them in April, May to a more permanent place in the garden.
Yes.
But then, but you can start your seeds in March, April, and they'll be ready to go in. But it's so much fun just fantasizing about what you want to grow and how you're going to grow it and what new thing you're going to try this year.
Wow, that sounds good. Fresh herbs too. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So you're closing up in September. Oh my gosh, and they'll be back though. We're gonna bring them back so they can talk more about the gardens. But you've been listening to TalkTainmentRadio.com, and you can download this podcast to cell, telephone, or tablet. Stay right there. Coming up next, we're going to talk about a new organization, the Black Restaurant Association. Coming up next.